Welcome to the Citizens for Health radio show on Building Fortunes Radio with your hosts Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. Make sure you check us out by clicking on the Citizens for Health radio show link on buildingfortunesradio.com. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. Citizens for Health provides over 100,000 supporters with consumer news, action alerts, and opportunities to take action. For nearly 2 decades, Citizens for Health has been a nonprofit pioneer in the natural health freedom movement. The Citizens for Health Education Foundation offers tools to inform the public of health issues and educate and influence policymakers. Jim Turner is here to spread the word about some of the most interesting topics that can affect your world, from the dangers of mislabeled or dangerous products to the questions and concerns of vaccines. You'll want to listen to Jim as he speaks on behalf of Citizens for Health. And now, on to our show with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. Take it away, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You're listening to us on Building Fortunes Radio. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For all those people unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingils. We run this radio station, and we have us on with Jim Turner every Friday when he is available, and almost all the time where he can. He actually jumps on the radio show at noon on Eastern Time. And if you want to dial in just like he does, 347-237-4097. That's 347-237-4097. You can always go to buildingfortunesradio.com/live. buildingfortunesradio.com/live. I had a great distinction of meeting Jim Turner lots of years ago, probably about 6 years ago, roughly. And as a result of that, I found that he founded or helped it was founded already, but he really kind of been working with it almost since the beginning, an organization called Citizens for Health. They have our website, citizens.org, citizens.org. So if you go to citizens.org, you should sign up for their newsletter. One of the great things about having Jim here is he's able to give us almost up-to-the-minute messages and notices on some of the stuff that you just don't have access to. And today's radio show will be a great example of that. Last week, as you will hear, he was in Arizona. I'm going to let him tell you all about it. And he's on his cell phone. He pulled over. He's in Washington, D.C. today. But if you hear beeping in the background, that's probably a whole bunch of people calling for him. But that's okay because he took time out for us, and we certainly appreciate it. So, Jim Turner, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Peter. I'm glad to be here. As usual, we have a lot of interesting things worthy of talking about. What do you want to start with?
Well, I want to start off with where were you? We'll do the old thing like, where were you last week?
Well, we had a very interesting set of meetings in Phoenix, Arizona. There's a project there that we work with, which is called Living Medicine. Gladys McGarry is a 98-year-old MD who just wrote her next 10-year plan. You wouldn't know that she was over 50 if you met and talked with her. And she has a system called Living Medicine, which is now being incorporated into some joint projects with a very important local hospital group and insurance group. And it's a very, very big cutting-edge effort to broaden out medicine in a way that makes it more available, makes the natural, non-pharmaceutical, non-radiation, non-surgery approach much, much more accessible to people. So you might want to just check Living Medicine on, just Google Living Medicine Gladys McGarry. And they're in the midst now of a $100 million endowment fundraiser, which they plan to have filled out in the next 120 days. And they had kicked it off in our meeting that was in Arizona. We kicked it off with one of the gentlemen who was a participant in the dinner delivering a $20 million check to the project.
Wow.
So it was a very, very, very useful and quite uplifting meeting. And then other folks came along and made contributions. I don't know how much they made that night, but in the next 120 days, they're looking for $100 million, and they'll be launching a Living Medicine Health Village that will be using all these various non-intrusion approaches all the way from birth through death, or as Dr. McGarry says, from lust to dust, and creating a a real opportunity for people to get help with their health and avoid getting all the negatives that come from the conventional way that we treat people. The point here is that.
Can I blend in a story that just happened here in Florida that you can maybe blend into what you're talking about right now? In the state of Florida, there was a young couple that had a 3-year-old who has cancer. And the diagnosis was, or whatever the treatment was supposed to be, that the young kid was supposed to get chemotherapy. After the first treatment of chemotherapy, the kid became ill from the chemotherapy, and the parents decided, we think we want to try a more natural, healthier alternative, and they decided to skip their second appointment for the chemotherapy. And for some odd reasons, the authorities were called. They were running away to Kentucky because they were afraid of what would happen, and the government tracked them down, grabbed the kid, and now is forcing the kid to go through chemotherapy, basically taking the kid out of their parents' responsibility in their hands, and who knows what other repercussions. So is this going to be like, if you could tie that sad, if you will, scenario into what you're talking about, I would appreciate it.
Well, that particular scenario that you're describing is happening way too frequently across the country. And it's an extremely unfortunate approach, and we've had to deal with it on several occasions. The idea of this activity in Phoenix, Arizona, is that it has a wide support from the medical community, and what we're doing there, what's being done there that we're helping with, is getting the mainstream medical community to recognize the role that these natural integrative alternatives and complementary approaches plays. I was starting to say when you asked the question that the promise and the premise here is that there is a role for these very robust interventions that come from conventional medicine, and there is a definite role for the natural healing approaches. Our basic argument is we've gotten them backwards. We should be using the natural healing stuff first and developing it, and then, if it seems appropriate, go to the more intrusive approaches. The situation on the cancer issues, where the Child Protection Services are taking kids away, is pretty stark and pretty unpleasant. We have a situation in which, in one state, in which an individual went to the doctor for a checkup, and they found it was a child. They took their child and they did a physical and found some potential cancer problems, and said right at that point that they should stay right there and get chemotherapy. That was resisted, and then the doctor called the Child Protection Service, and then there was a very interesting battle, and ultimately we were able, in that particular instance, to drag it out long enough that the child was 18 and could turn down the chemotherapy, and did. That was about a year's worth of legal work to drag it out. It was 17 when the problem was identified. But one of the things that occurred in a similar case was that the doctor called the Child Protection Service. The court held a hearing, and the expert on the hearing was the doctor who had called Child Protection Services. And then the doctor made the recommendation to the court that the child get the treatments, and the court ordered the treatments, and then insurance paid $98,000 to the doctor for giving the treatments. Our position was that was a very biased and improper approach. We unfortunately did not win that case, but I'm saying that is the kind of thing going on, and it's unfortunate, and it's happening across the country. We really need to refine the tools that are out there for making these kinds of decisions.
Well, so I didn't want to throw you off, but I just wanted to bring that up because hopefully this foundation and all the fundraising money helps set the precedent to take the power away from those people that want to grab kids away from their parents if they want to use something natural. And that's what the parents wanted to do. They wanted to try a natural method instead of the chemotherapy because the kid had such a violent reaction. So,
well,
back to you.
our fundamental position at Citizens for Health is the right to informed choice, and we believe that no official authority can or should override the decisions of an individual or the person standing in for that individual. And if they are going to have an override, that has to be done with extremely strong evidence, not and unbiased evidence, not the kind of thin evidence that currently exists with the kind of biases that these huge payments that go to doctors who recommend establishment approaches get. So that's what's going on in Arizona. I think it's going to be a very interesting issue or situation to watch the development of the living medicine activity. They're going to do a health village, and they're going to create a very much more robust healthcare hospital system environment for the patients and consumers that come into that world. So that's something to be watching, and we'll keep you up to speed on how that's going.
Perfect. And then you said something about a meeting with the FDA, I think.
Yeah, we did this past Tuesday. We took a delegation of basically 6 people to meet with several FDA officials, including the chief drug enforcement person, probably maybe one of the 1 or 2 most significant line operating officials at the FDA, the one in charge is making all the decisions about what's a safe and effective drug. And we presented an argument for creating a system that allows and supports the use of homeopathy more robustly than currently the FDA would like to permit. The situation is that for 30 years, from 87 to 17, FDA recognized homeopathy as being a unique and different system of treatment that was recognized in the law, because the law identifies a drug as one of the definitions is any substance that appears in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the U.S. And then it has a whole set of rules about how you deal with old drugs and new drugs and so forth. And we're saying that any product that's in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the U.S. is an old drug and has a specific license to be sold under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938. And that's what this guidance of 1987 said. That guidance was called CPG 400-400, Compliance Policy Guide 400-400. And we argued that that was, in fact, the way the law was intended to be applied. But in 2017, FDA repealed that approach and decided to subject homeopathy, that is, products labeled as homeopathic. They subject those products to regulation as if they were new drugs, and they require a new drug application and going through all of the tests and so forth. The government official expert in one of the cases that we had said that testing one active ingredient for the FDA double-blind, placebo-controlled study, which is their gold standard, one active ingredient going through that would cost about $100 million. The idea that the FDA would think that it was going to help the public to have a product which the public likes to use and is totally legal under the interpretation of the law that the FDA made 30 years ago, the idea that the FDA would say that should be treated as a new drug and subjected to a minimum of $100 million worth of research studies is preposterous. And we attempted to, and I think had a good hearing at the FDA. The senior official president said that it was obvious that there was a lot of communication misunderstanding between the group, which was the Americans for Homeopathy Choice. You can Google them and find out what's going on about this whole battle. That is Americans for Homeopathy Choice. That approach that the FDA is proposing in its guidance from December of 2017 will deprive consumers of some, and it ultimately could be all, homeopathic remedies. The FDA says that's not what they intended. They don't want that to be the case, and they said they were open to discussions or comments about how to protect people from things they think are unsafe without taking things away from the public, which are in fact safe and effective. And we believe it can be done. For example, we think that anything that's called homeopathic that's not in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia should be treated differently than anything in the homeopathic pharmacopoeia. And the FDA had sort of felt that they hadn't, or at least the way they responded, they hadn't considered that idea. So we're hoping that they will consider it now. Americans for Homeopathy Choice has a petition pending before the FDA in order to sort all of this out, and that petition has been acknowledged by FDA, and they appear to be pursuing the process they're required to pursue under the Administrative Procedures Act. So the meeting with the FDA was very interesting because we had a full, as they would say in a diplomatic hearing, full and fair exchange of views and some meetings of mind, and we think we have an opportunity here to make some serious progress in making the marketplace safe for homeopathic products. So that's what happened at the FDA.
Excellent. So it's amazing what happens sometimes when people sit down and they actually start communicating.
It's amazing. It changes everything.
Okay, let's see. I think, there was another topic that you wanted, and I know you're on the road, so do you tell me if you need a little break to kind of catch a breather, or you're still good?
No, I'm fine. We got another 10 minutes or so to go. I'm fine.
Yep, we do. Okay, so now the next part was on 5G. So for those people unfamiliar with 5G, just give us a little update on what 5G is, and then you can share with us what's happening.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're hoping to retire the name 5G from the marketplace in the next last couple of years. It's 5G means fifth generation of wireless communications. It's a pure advertising slogan. Its primary purpose is to disguise the fact that the three biggest wireless providers, AT&T, Sprint Mobile, and Verizon, are basically buying at auction the highest, the narrowest and highest frequencies off of the electromagnetic frequency band, and they're doing so basically at a steal. They're going to get, for a relatively small amount of money, they're going to get billions of dollars worth of access to the electromagnetic field, and that's going to mean a whole lots of money for them and for people on the stock market. It's fun, it's interesting, and it carries lots of problems. There are national security problems, there are privacy problems, there are health problems, there are efficiency problems. It's not an efficient way to communicate. However, 4G, the fourth generation of Wi-Fi, which is kind of the thing that we're doing most of what we're doing on now, it's also a slogan, but its profiles for stock market purposes were weakening. Great growth that they had in the early period when they were pushing cell phones out and so forth diminished, and they were down not quite flat, but they were pretty slow. And this is mainly for stock market purposes. So what they did is start up making up stories like driverless cars and 5G, the slogan 5G, and they got things pushed through the Federal Communications Commission that denied any health problems. The FCC has no scientific capacity to deal with biology and health. Conceptually, they have written some standards that have to do with when a cell phone catches fire. They're thermal safety standards, but they've done nothing about the non-thermal radiation safety standards. They have no guidelines on that set of questions. And they've slipped this all through. All this is going on. Billions of dollars worth of market power are being allocated, and basically the public, including the government, has been excluded from any kind of participation in how this basically public asset is going to be turned into a private windfall, especially for stockholders. So, for example, the driverless car experiments are going badly enough that that some even industry insiders are saying we're very unlikely to see a driverless car because the way that it works makes it very difficult for those kinds of cars to be all driving down the road together, particularly when there are non-driverless cars driving down the same roads. So that the driverless car thing, which is a great pitch for if you want to sell stock, isn't too good for helping people get around. The same thing applies to the entire 5G rollout experiments, which are going on right now. Sacramento has got huge towers of so-called 5G towers, which are actually not meeting the standards that they're supposed to meet in order to be considered to be a success. It's just across the board, the whole thing is such a bad idea, and the dangers that it's creating for it's the dangers for personal privacy, dangers for national security, dangers, environmental dangers, health dangers to the individual, none of which have been evaluated by anybody in any authority. So what's happening now is that it's very interesting to see groups of consumers, communities. There are over 100 cities that have sued the FCC on this issue. Members of Congress, there's several members of Congress have written to the FCC and said, if you say this thing is safe, we'd like to see the data that it's based on. Well, there isn't any data, so there's no data coming forward. And the members of Congress, and Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut is the leader of the group, they're pushing hard to get new information. And then, in addition to the health problems, there are environmental problems, and the problems that 5G has. I mean, I'll just give you an example of it. This isn't a health problem, but it's an example of the doublespeak of the industry. When they argue that they want the thing to roll out, they say it's going to be the tool that corrects the digital divide between rural and urban America. When you start talking about the harm that it might cause to crops and trees and forests, things that aren't in the city, they say, well, you don't need to worry because it'll never be anywhere but where there's a high concentration of population, which is in major cities. So the whole thing is it's probably a stock market hoax, but it's a hoax of some kind. And what's happening now is some industry people with some consumer groups, with some health groups, national security groups, and so forth, are working together to figure out how to create an alternative which will allow access to the marvelous communicating tools that are involved here without exposing human beings, the environment, national security, privacy, without exposing any of those things to harm, or at least the excessive harm that's being allowed right now. So keep your eyes out. Citizens for Health is going to be involved in this in some way. We're doing some research and developing some strategies, and so that's an important area to know about. And it's something. It's one of those things that you can't do much about because they put these antennas down right in the middle of your community, and then you're involved in being sprayed by that material that comes out of that antenna. None of that's necessary to have the major communications efficiencies that we have. It might be necessary to be able to download a movie in real time when you're walking. We say, well, maybe you can download it at home before you start walking, and then you can watch it without downloading it when you're walking around the street. But those kind of issues, there needs to be a forum for those issues to be addressed, and currently there is none, and that's what we're working on. That's what we're bringing into existence, actually. So that's a very important health issue because it covers everybody.
Yeah, those are big things, and I subscribe or visit different websites, and a lot of the ones that I subscribe to or visit that are related to finances, like stock market stuff, they are all over this. Like, this is the biggest thing. This is the hottest thing. You're missing the wave. This is going to be the internet, like the internet bubble before, but better, and it's going to be huger, and it's global, and everybody's going to get rich. So all the finance guys are talking about the money. And none of them, I think, really, I hate to say it, and I can't speak their personal values or their moral values, but I don't think they care about the environment or people or birds or bees or anything else like that. I just don't think they care. They're just all about the money. And there's obviously that group of people that are out there.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned the dot-com bubble, and it's interesting because it was a very heavy shock to the American economy, and it was a very heavy shock to some of the high-tech momentum that was underway at the time. That's in the mid-late 90s. And a whole bunch of people got really rich during the dot-com collapse. And that basically is because so much of one of these bubbles is stock market hype. The idea being that I don't know, I used to get calls. I don't get them much anymore, but I used to get calls that say, come up to Gettysburg and look at the new Gettysburg Golf and Resort area where we're going to be able to sell acre plots or 5-acre plots, and you can come and buy one and get in on the ground floor. And you go up there, and what they tell you is if you buy the one right now for $5,000, you'll be able to sell it within a year for $10,000 or $12,000. And all they're selling is the basic Ponzi scheme of the next guy in. And then what happens, as it did in the dot-com venture capital world, eventually there's no next buyer. You've saturated everything, and then the whole thing just falls apart. That is being predicted now as something that's going to happen even to Amazon. Amazon's never made any money off its sales. Uber, which is looking for $82 billion, is their cap right now. Never made any money. These companies that they don't make money on their actual services or sales. What they do is they make money off their advertising, their lists, and things of that kind. But a new book by George Gilder called Life After Google is claiming, based on analysis and so forth, that these companies can't last. That they're built on basically an economic sand, and that it's kind of like trying to remember what AOL meant back in the 90s, I guess it was, when they merged with Time Magazine. AOL. Now we don't think about it much anymore. We don't, probably most of the younger people never even heard of it, don't know what it means. But at one point it was a very, very powerful looking entity which was making, trying to gobble up the whole economy. That's what these things now, Uber and Facebook and Amazon and so forth, look like. And I think there's a good chance they're going to have trouble in the next decade holding on to their positions. The stock market guys are very, very good at pushing it right to the point of when it's going to turn around and collapse, and they start getting out of it, and that feeds the collapse. So it's one part of it's a venture world, investment world, and the other part is the real world, communication world, and they're out of sync in terms of the well-being of the economy of the country. So anyway,
right.
We rambled a little bit, but I can tell you there are people in industry, there are consumers, there are health people, all looking for, and government, all looking for stabilizing this whole area and actually kind of retiring the name 5G and eliminating some of the dangers and building up some of the stuff that makes that new system of communications much less dangerous.
Excellent information. We're going to let Jim go back on the road wherever he's going. Hopefully you'll be able to come back next week and give us some more great information. But if you want to check it out, for those people that are wondering, Gladys McGarey is spelled, Gladys like Gladdys, and then McGarey is McGarey. And that's a fascinating story. Never heard of that before. Wish them well. And then thanks for the update on homeopathy and 5G. Next week, go check out citizens.org, citizens.org. And if you go to buildingfortunesradio.com/citizens, you'll be able to hear all the radio shows that we've done. And Jim, thanks a million for taking the time to pull over and have a nice conversation with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look forward to next week.
You've been listening to the Citizens for Health radio show, brought to you by Citizens for Health on buildingfortunesradio.com with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils. Thanks for listening. For nearly 2 decades, Citizens for Health has been a nonprofit pioneer in the natural health freedom movement. Go to www.citizens.org to learn more, and always listen in to Building Fortunes Radio, where our special host, Jim Turner, shares crucial information about many of the most important issues that affect your world. Citizens for Health provides over 100,000 supporters with consumer news, action alerts, and opportunities to take action. So listen in, get involved, and help spread the word. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website to hear more Citizens for Health segments with Jim Turner and Peter Mingils, and read about what's new on www.citizens.org. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. Jim Turner, Peter, and I want to say thanks for listening and ask you to go spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.